सदाकते इस्लाम कुछ भी हो जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना पड़े हमें जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना पड़े हमें.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and welcome to another live episode of Beacon of Truth. In this program, we discuss a variety of contemporary issues relevant to today's young Muslims. To help analyze these subjects, we get the views and expertise of some guests and the general public. And as this is a live and interactive program, you too can get in touch with any comments or questions via our Twitter handle, which is at beacon_MTA, or via email, the address of which is beacon@mta.tv. In this series so far, we have been analyzing and exploring the questions around the existence and how to develop certainty of God. We have also considered how religion and Islam are still relevant today. But a question that people often raise is, what is the need for religion in the first place? What benefit does it really give us? Humankind has evolved over many millennia, and so has our understanding and attitudes towards one another. But where did the ideas of moral goodness develop from? Did religion give us morality, or is it merely a product of our mental evolution? If religion is about providing to us principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong, or good and bad behavior, is that not something we can establish without the aid of religion? To explore such questions in greater depth, today I am in the studio. I am joined by Imam Ayaz Mahmood Khan Sahib on my immediate left, and Imam Raza Ahmed Sahib next to him, both of whom are Imams and scholars of the MTA Muslim community. Assalamu alaikum, gentlemen. Welcome to the show. So before we get into answering the specific question, I think it's worth exploring the idea of morality itself. So Raza Sahib, perhaps you can start and explain to us, what is morality?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Jazakallah Usman Sahib. Hazrat Muslim Maud Radhiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, in his book Way of the Seekers, he started this whole chapter and this whole kind of subject with that very point, meaning how do you define khulq? What is khulq? What is morals? So he said that there are three different kind of interpretations or definitions, but these are done by religions and by societies. However, they're quite different to what Islam believes.
Right.
And they're not really complete, if you want to say it like that. For the first one that he said, that according to some, it's a deep-rooted instinct, a faculty which enables a person to choose and adopt a course of action instantly without having to weigh or consider or judge. Then the second one, he says that it's a sensitivity which has been implanted by man, by a higher being. You call it God, or other religions or
right.
societies can call
so
it.
It's part of human nature?
Exactly.
Right.
That's a sensitivity which is in ourselves. Then the third one is that he says that it's the capability, or it's kind of a quality which has evolved generation to generation, which has been handed down or passed down from generation to generation. So these are the three ways of thinking. But he says that according to myself, and this is also what the Promised Messiah has mentioned as well, is that when these natural qualities, the Promised Messiah actually says that when natural qualities are regulated and used on their proper occasion, under the direction of reason, they acquire a moral character. Before that, you can't call them that. They're just instincts or just a reflex, basically, if you want to say it.
Right.
As an example, if you want to put it or show it through an example, we know as a Muslim reading namaz is a good thing. We also know that saving a person's life is a good thing.
Yes.
But let's say someone is drowning and you're reading namaz at the same time. It doesn't It doesn't turn to be a good thing if you're reading namaz at that time.
Right.
In that moment, it's your responsibility to save that person's life. So that's basically how you define morality.
Okay. One thing that some prominent atheists say, Sam Harris is one example. For example, he's an author and a prominent atheist. And I read somewhere his definition of what being morally good means. And if I'm quoting, it says that which supports well-being. So this sort of ties in with the third definition that the second Khalifa gave,
Exactly.
right? So, okay, that's interesting. Just talking about now religion and morality, and answering the question specifically of what came first. You know, some people say that morality evolved first, long before religion. How would we explain that?
If you look across the board, every nation, every country has a set of laws. And I'm pretty sure 100% of them would say that killing is bad, stealing is bad, lying is bad, thieves should be punished. Now, the earliest written laws on record were created in the city of Ur at that time. Which dates well back to the 21st century. Now, some say that there's another
21st century, meaning
before
BC,
Christ,
so
BC,
2000 years before
exactly.
Christ.
Now, some also say that there was a law drawn up by Hammurabi, who was a ruler in Babylon. So they found this 2-meter high, basically like a stone plate, which had different laws written on it. Again, it's the same thing. They also say that these are bad things and they should be punished.
Right.
You can't kill, you can't steal, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. But that's, as I mentioned, 21 centuries BC, 2,100 years before Christ.
Right.
Hazrat Adam alayhi salatu wasalam came 6,000 years before Christ. Now, we know, or we believe that mankind and humanity had to reach a certain level of intellect, of spirituality, of their physical development as well, when Allah Ta'ala decided, okay, now humankind is ready to receive my laws.
Right.
Now they're ready to receive
So the mental
teaching.
faculties have developed to such an
Exactly.
extent that they could be given more comprehensive teachings
Yes.
that they can understand and implement.
Because before that, we were hunters and gatherers. Right?
Right.
There was no societies per se. There were just groups and people just following from one way to another.
Right.
But at that time, when Hazrat Adam ﷺ was created, or when he was born, Allah Ta'ala said, okay, now mankind is ready to accept my laws. They're ready for divine communication. They're ready to know what is good and what is not good.
Right.
And from these laws, we know that it's the basic things. Don't do this, don't do that,
Yes.
because they're bad. And
Right.
we all know nowadays, today, that these are bad things. And if you look across the board, every nation, the basic, very 10 commandments, you could say,
Yes.
they're all the same.
So across the world, there's similar ideas that they permeate all
When it comes
nations.
to the laws, the written
Right,
laws, the
okay.
code of conducts,
But something that perhaps some atheists and people who believe in a secular ideology may say is that that is something that people have learned generation to generation, similar to the definition that the secular people give. Is that not a fact?
what
Yeah, go on.
if that was the case, you would have the same or different developments in different regions, right?
Right.
We know that, for example, the resources that we have here in Europe, people don't have those in Asia and some other countries and other continents. But this development of what is right and what is wrong, it's across the board. Every nation agrees, okay, this is bad. If you kill a person,
Yes.
this is considered to be a bad thing.
Right.
thing is-
Yes, go on, please.
The thing is, if what we deem to be morally correct or good behavior, if it was merely the evolution of society and our mental faculties as our ancestors learned, that is the thing that proves that to be wrong is if it was merely evolution and our ancestors learned through their experience that these are the things which are good because they give us benefit and these are the things which are bad because they cause us harm, that fundamentally is flawed. Because you have religious principles which are universal and which, as Raza Sahib was saying, accepted across the board through
Right.
all the religious ideologies, that these are good deeds. And those good things are actually either they give us no benefit whatsoever or they are to our detriment.
Right.
And we still do those things. So if we were taking a purely rationalistic perspective, and we were only doing things which we considered to be good for ourselves personally, and abstaining from things which we consider to be bad for our own self well-being,
Yes.
then you wouldn't have examples of, for example, giving testimony and speaking the truth, even if that testimony causes you to go receive punishment, for example.
Right.
Whereas religion tells you that even if you have to give testimony against yourself, and the Quran also says this as well, that even if you have to give testimony against your loved ones and your dear ones and
Yes.
your own self, and there is a possibility that you will be punished for giving that truthful testimony, you should still speak the truth. So that demonstrates that this isn't a mere blinded evolution which we have
There's a
learned over
guided,
time. There is
evolution
something
there.
above and beyond our
Right.
own mental processes, which is God, and religion, which instills those
Okay.
good qualities in us.
I'd like to just bring in one tweet that we've had over the last few days. It's from Adnan Heder. And I think it's an important question that we need to ask is, do we need morality to define religion, or do we need religion to define morality? And this is a question that we often get asked or is posed to people who believe in religion. So how do you respond to that?
I think the question about whether we need religion for morality firstly stems from what Raza Sahib was mentioning, that all of the good qualities that we act upon today,
Yes.
whether we are religious people or non-religious people, they stem from religion. And religion was the first institution which taught us that these things are good and these things are bad. And that demonstrates that there is definitely a need for religion. Even today, non-religious societies have similar principles, and they accept that killing is bad, theft is bad, usurping another person's rights are wrong. And this demonstrates that these good things stemmed from God and from religion.
Right.
And if we take a step forward and put that to one side, there's another reason why religion is very, very important in establishing morality. And the reason for that is because without religion, we would have no concept of objective morality.
Right.
We would only have subjective morality or moral perspectives. If we ask an atheist why they think a certain action is bad, they would say that, well, I know theft is bad because I've heard this from many atheists when I speak to them, and we've all heard this. They'll say, well, you just know when something's bad,
Yes.
and that's why it's bad. Even if there was no God and no religion, I still know that I shouldn't commit injustice, I shouldn't kill people, I shouldn't commit other indecencies. But the question is that if you ask that individual on what basis they deem that to be wrong, the only answer they can give you is because my heart says so. Well, we could come around and say that, well, another person halfway across the earth who is from a different society, in a different culture, and he also doesn't believe in God, they have a different idea of what is right and wrong. And that demonstrates, and how would you prove that they are right and you're wrong, or you're wrong and they're right? There's no reason why one moral perspective should be more acceptable than another person's moral perspective.
Right.
So when you have, for example, there's so many people throughout the world, mass shootings are done by disgusting people. And when you ask them after why they did that, they thought that they were doing that and they were right in doing that action because they're trying to teach the government a lesson for some kind of political issue.
They took a moral position, and for that reason,
Right.
they basically then carried out an action.
For example, a person, there are people who will say that capital punishment, for example, is a
Yes.
very decent punishment for people who take another person's life.
Yes.
Even today, in certain American states, we have capital punishment.
Absolutely.
In the UK, that's not acceptable.
Yep.
You have examples.
So that's the subjectivity.
That's a subjective thing. There's issues, for example, which revolve around, I don't know, if you take, there was a very famous story a few years ago about the famous Delhi rapist
Yes.
who raped a poor girl, and those people say that we were right in doing so. She shouldn't have been out late at night.
Right.
She deserved it, God
Oh.
forbid.
Yeah.
So how do you differentiate what is right or wrong? It's God, that anchor point, which demonstrates conclusively that this is right and this is wrong.
Right, okay.
And without religion, you can't have that.
So, moral teachings or religion, how can we say that it has in any way helped society? Because, there are differences in ideas, right?
So,
So could you give us some examples?
For example, let's take, if we simply cast a glance on history and see the transformation which the prophets of God have brought about, that is an immense proof of how religion really changes society for the better. We could go on and on and on, but let's just take a look at the Prophet of Islam. The Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, came in an era where every injustice was committed, every injustice in the book, things you can think of and things which you cannot even think of, those people used to do those things. For example, it was considered an act of honor for cruel fathers to bury their baby girls alive because it was a dishonor to their family to have a girl born in their household. Women had no right to inherit any property. When their husbands passed away, their sons would forcefully marry them and use them. You had examples of slavery. Slaves were taken by force and misused and mistreated. You had examples of people going to war over petty issues and those feuds lasting for years upon years. You had people who were so intoxicated in alcohol and they would drink to such an extent that they would drink 5 times a day, it's written. They had times during the day. And they would walk around drunk and commit atrocities. And then you have the Prophet of Islam come in that day and age, and he raised a voice for the justice that women deserved, and baby girls were saved from the injustices that were being committed against them. You had women's rights established to such extent that women received such a high status in Islam that there's reports that certain husbands would come to the Holy Prophet and say that, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, before you, these women, they had no courage to speak in front of us, and now they retort to us, and they give us your example that your wives also take an active part in your daily..." It was Hazrat Umar. And the Prophet of Islam would smile and say, "Well, they deserve that right." Then Islam gave rights to slaves, and you had people, it's very famous, that when the injunction was revealed in the Holy Quran for intoxicants to be forbidden, when alcohol was forbidden, it was announced in Medina, and people were engaged at that time in drinking. They were actually intoxicated. And this messenger came and said that the Holy Prophet of Islam has just told us that alcohol has been forbidden. And even in that state of intoxication, they threw away all of their alcohol.
So this is a good example of where religion has introduced a number of very strong moral values in a society. So that's very interesting. I think this is a good time for us to take a look at some of the views of the general public. And so we went out to on the streets of London and we asked people the question that does morality come from religion? So let's take a look at that video now.
I think morality came first. I think religion evolved from morality because people felt that they needed some leadership for whatever reason. But I actually, religion and morality, I think that you can be a very moral person without having a religion. I certainly have no religion, and I think that I'm a very moral person. I know the difference between right and wrong, and I think that I have an inner compass. So, do you have to be religious to be moral? No, I don't think so. I think morality came first.
Without religion, there'd still be morality, and without morality, there'd still most likely be religion, would be my answer personally. Like, both would have come without the other, and both are around with the other, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
I would say morality came before religion. I'm not sure religion has a place, to be honest, in terms of society. It would be a controversial but a view that I hold personally.
I'm a deeply irreligious person. I think a lot of people derive morality from religion, but I don't think religion is necessary to have morality. You can have moral values independent of religion, but I guess a lot of people find it easier or more sort of natural for the values when they arise from religion.
It's a difficult question. I think morality might come from religion, but I think that ethics is independent of religion and can develop also without a religion base, and that most religions, I would say almost all religions, show a common ethic and morality base.
I mean, I guess religion started all the basis of what we have as that. I don't but like, I don't know, I think it's developed into something else now. We don't need religion to show us morality anymore, but we did back in the day.
It depends on your view of religion, really. It depends what came first. If you believe there's a creative force behind the origins of the universe, then morality must have come from religion. If you believe that there's no creative force behind the origins of the universe, then morality wouldn't have come from religion.
Yeah, actually morality is something universal from my point of view. It's not related directly to the religion, but the religion came actually just to emphasize on the morality things. Yeah.
I think the people who are religious, they always think that the morality comes from the religion. But I think it's inside the human being also. The people who are not religious, they can still be moral. They can still be ethical. I think it's inside the human being. Like looking after your parent, looking at the other things. Religion make it better, make you understand and connect it, but the morality is in the part of the human being.
I think everybody's got a sort of inner human morality, I guess. So religion is, I think, is a good way of bringing it out in people, no matter what religion it is, to bring that sort of morality and a like-minded thinkingness like together. But with or without religion, I think we all have like an inner moral sense. But religion's almost like a way of channeling that morality and sharing it with other people, like who feel the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like religion does play and did play like a very important part in building modern morality. But like Fred said, we all have something inside us, like human, that makes us feel for other people. And so I feel like religion did play a big part in morality, but there's still that human nature inside of us as well.
I agree, entirely, yes. Certainly our culture in the West came from the Christian religion, and no doubt many of the Middle Eastern and Eastern cultures came from Islam. And the moralities, which are in many cases, although not all similar, definitely came from those religions, in my opinion.
No, I don't think morality came from religion. I mean, I don't think I personally want to believe that we need something to be good people or to have morals. I think we should be able to do that without a set of guidelines.
I think it would be same. Yeah, I don't think it comes from religion. I think it comes from us, from the basic, I don't know what you should say, instinct maybe. Yeah, so I don't think it's religion, no.
Okay, so very interesting comments there from people, or the public, I should say. So, both can exist without each other. If God exists, then morality came from religion, one person said. And also this idea that it is in our human nature to be moral, and that morality is from religion as well, one person said. What do you guys think of this?
Well, I would agree with, there was only one gentleman that I would agree with, and that was the point that I was making earlier, that if you look at the laws of this country, they're based on Christian values and Christian teachings. And then you go to other countries, for example, Islamic countries, they're based on the religious teachings of that religion. Now, as a Muslim or Hazrat Mirza Bashir Ahmad Sahib, in one of his books, he mentioned, that was the point that we were making earlier. If everything is the same, the basic requirements are the same, the basic laws are the same, yes, you can say that, oh, we develop differently. Nowadays, it's not a thing to we're a global village, we have everything on our laptops and screens, but go back hundreds and thousands of years.
Right.
We didn't know what was happening in Norway, we didn't know what was happening in India, but the development was still the same. The values were still the same.
Right.
Because 124,000 prophets were sent to different nations. They came all with the same message. Okay, so this is right.
There's a commonality of values across the world. Yeah. And our view is that there have been so many prophets.
And even you have developed nations, you have poorer nations, industrial nations and these so-called third world countries. But the moral values, with the exception of one or two, they're still the same. And we have some of that research that we're probably going to go through that in just a bit as well.
Yes. Okay.
But overall, if you look at it, it's pretty much the same.
Okay. An interesting tweet that we received, and there's two tweets I want to read out. So the first one is from Sheikh Samar Ahmed, who's written in, and he said that it is boasted in the current day and age by many that we don't need religion because we're good people. Is the statement true, is the question he asks, and what role does religion play in shaping our morality? But there was a response to this from someone who, based on his Twitter handle, he's a proud atheist, that's the title of his Twitter handle, and he says that religion does not play a role in shaping morality. It does not, he says. Religion is not required to behave in a civilized fashion. Obey man-made laws, they are the only ones that count. So Ayasa, what do you think of this?
Well, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Rabi, the fourth caliph of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, he explains this very concept and says, well, let's talk about mere man-made laws. There is a defect in mere man-made laws where religion will take you one step higher and ensure that true morality is established. And how is that? He explains that, for example, man-made legislation will give you a threat of punishment or reward for doing a certain action which it deems to be good or moral or acceptable in society.
Yeah.
That's fine. But there's something which man-made legislation cannot reach to. And the words of Hazrat Khalifa Rabi are very beautiful. He says that man-made legislation does not reach the root or the breeding ground of sin, which is the secret chambers of the heart, basically.
Right.
So a person who is following man-made laws or legislation, he will, we see this all the time. I'm not going to name any names, I'm not going to mention myself, but we all know that certain individuals, quote unquote, they'll be overspeeding, and as soon as there's a yellow camera, they will slow down at the speed camera or at the average camera zone, and then as soon as that zone ends,
they speed up again.
They'll speed up again.
Yes.
That's not morality. That's following man-made legislation, but you're only following the law because you're afraid you're going to get a ticket and there's a speed camera. A righteous person, a moral person, will follow the speed limit all throughout the A3, even when there's no speed camera to give him a fine. And that's what Hazrat Khalifa Rabi says. The fourth caliph, may Allah shower mercy upon him, he says that religion gives you this belief in an all-knowing God who watches you every second of your life, even when you are in seclusion.
Okay.
So even when you have an opportunity to do something wrong and nobody will catch you for that, you will not do that wrong action. And that is true morality. True morality is not doing something when you're afraid that someone's going to punish you for it.
So the laws can't really develop morality, and whereas the belief in the existence of a God
Well, the morality that man-made legislation establishes is a defective form of morality. You still do good, but the real test comes when you do good when there's no one else to see you.
The thing with humanity is, if you think about, these spaceships, they have booster rockets.
Right.
So they go up to a certain height and then those rockets drop. That was the case with humanity, if you can think of it. Just remember that. I'm not sure if it makes any sense. But because mankind has reached a certain height and those booster rockets,
they don't need them anymore.
They don't need them anymore. But now we're floating at that height and we say we got up to this point, through our own self. It was our doing.
Okay.
That's what the flaw is with humanity, because we have this free will and all of these
Whereas
things.
that intellectual level that we're at now, where we say that, we know what is right and wrong, that came through many, many years of evolutionary development, which religion brought into our lives from generation to generation.
It's a really interesting point that you've made just now, that with the idea of the rockets, and it's about the development of humanity. There's certain guidelines that have been given in order to develop us so that we become at a higher level of morality, not just the very basic level, as it were, to start with. So that's really interesting. I'd like to just move on slightly to this piece of research that I came across, which I thought was quite interesting for this conversation. It was from Pew Research Center, and we may have an image to show on the screen as well. They did a global morality survey back in 2013, so not too long ago. They went across to 40 countries, and they questioned about 40,000 people across that, so it's quite a vast survey. And in this, we see that across the world, a great number of people find many conservative views. They hold many conservative views regarding morality, things like extramarital affairs and gambling and so on. And these things they believe are unacceptable. So my question is that just by holding conservative views, does that mean that you are a better person? Is that because this is what, reading these stats, that's potentially what it's trying to say.
I think the very interesting thing of that article, that as far as I remember, the title of that article stated that something along the lines of everyone has a different view on what is moral or not. So in certain countries, what is deemed conservative isn't so conservative in other countries.
Right.
And it comes back to that question that we were discussing earlier of objective and subjective morality. Now, without God and without religion, you will have moral perspectives. You have subjective morality. So what is deemed the height of conservatism in this society may not be in another country. And what is deemed to be right or wrong in that country may not reach the threshold of people in this country. So culture and your background and your environment, these are all factors which basically mold your understanding of what is conservative or not.
Right.
So when you say being conservative makes you more moral, my question is, what is the definition of conservative? Because everyone has their own definition. And that's why, although people have different actions in different countries throughout the world, and although the moral or immoral actions of people, again, it's an issue of definition, although those vary widely in different countries, the ingrained understanding of what is moral and immoral is the same across the board.
Right.
And when do we realize, how can that be proven? Let's say in one country, something which is considered moral is immoral in another country.
Yes.
The people will act accordingly. But when it comes to them being the victims of that immoral action, then everyone has the same definition of what is moral. So for example, a person who says that it's all right to torture someone to get information for them for national security, quote unquote. The other person, if you ask that person who believes that view, and you say, well, what if you're the one that's on the end that's being tortured? Then their definition will change, and they'll say, well, no, we shouldn't permit that.
Right, right.
So the thing is,
it's subjective.
It's subjective, and there's a very humorous, funny story that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih II used to tell about Khalifa Awwal, and he met a thief, and he was speaking to the thief and asking him how he goes about undertaking his robberies, and where does he steal his gold from, and how does he turn that into cash. And he said, well, I take the gold and I take it to a person who melts the gold, and then I take the gold and I change it and I stash it. And Khalifa Awwal asked him, well, isn't that wrong? And he said, no, it's not wrong. And he said, okay, well, anyway, what if when you're giving the gold to that person to melt, that person takes some of the gold and hides it from you? What would you do? And he was like, well, if I found out, I would take him to task for it. So Khalifa Awwal used to smile and say that even the thief knows that being a thief is wrong, because when it comes to him, then he realizes that this shouldn't be done.
Right, okay. Sticking with some of the research from the Pew Research Center, they asked another question as part of the same survey, and the question that they asked was, is belief in God essential to morality? And I think this is another chart we can show. And just down the left-hand side, you can see all these 40-odd countries and split by continent. But generally, the yellow tabs you can see is where they said that they believe it is not necessary to believe in God to be moral, and on the other side is where they believe it is necessary. And there's a very clear distinction there between Europe and the Western nations, where they don't believe that you need to believe in God for morality. So my question, and on the opposite side, in the Middle East and Asia and Africa, they do believe that you need to have a belief in God in order to be moral. So I mean, I want to ask the question that, what is your view on this very question? Is belief in God essential for us to have morality?
From a religious point of view, if you ask me as a Muslim, I think it is. Because, again, we're going in circles here a little bit.
Yes.
I believe and I know that the laws that I live by, the laws of the Holy Quran, which are then found in laws of the countries, are given by God. Secondly, this is always portrayed as a negative thing. If you ask atheists, so why do you do certain things? Oh, because you're afraid of punishment, or because you're selfish and you want the reward. what's so bad about this? I mean, we do all the things in our lives because we want to be rewarded for that.
Right.
We go to work because we want to get money. We don't go through speeding cameras with 35 because the speed is 30 because we don't want to get fined. What is so wrong about having that belief in God?
Right. So, I mean, it's a means of encouragement.
It is,
Right.
definitely.
Okay.
I mean, instead of looking at all the negative things, when it comes to accountability and the concept of heaven and hell, hell is not eternal. I mean, we know that Allah Ta'ala has said that my mercy encompasses everything in the Holy Quran.
So the
right?
punishment that is promised, as it were, is not an eternal punishment.
It's basically, it's a process of curing yourself.
Right.
You know, depending on how much evil you've done in your life, you'll be, for a limited time in hell.
So it's part of the development process of morality as such?
Absolutely, but I mean, as Raza Sahib has mentioned, we don't say that all atheists are immoral people, because there's clear examples of atheists who are very moral.
Yes, they do a lot of good
they
as
do
well.
good
Yes.
things. They give charity. They tend to the sick. They take care of their parents. That's not. We never suggest that they're not moral, but what we say, as Raza Sahib was mentioning, is that there's nothing wrong with believing in God and understanding the fact that we are accountable to an all-knowing being who will call us to account if we do something wrong, even when we are in seclusion and no one else is watching us. In fact, that heightens our level of morality. Because where a pure rationalist, when the time comes for him to make a decision about whether he should do a certain action or give preference to his own soul, chances are that a purely rational individual will give preference to themselves. Because quite frankly, the concept of the survival of the fittest is based on that very rational concept where, forget everybody else, I need to save myself.
Okay.
And it's at that point where religion comes and says that even if you have to sacrifice yourself for the greater good or for the benefit of other people, then you should do that. And that's why religion is a
There's a very
heightened
interesting point that you've just made there, which links in with a tweet that we've just received from a Dure. The name is Dure, and they say that one who follows a religion knows morality is a part of their identity through the belief and faith in God, whereas an atheist, for example, would practice morality but to no higher spiritual benefit. So that sort of ties in with what you were saying.
Absolutely.
There's another tweet as well that we received earlier this week, I think is an important question to answer, is that does history mention the first person to lay the foundation of a moral society? If so, where did he pick up the idea from, or was it divine guidance? It sort of links in with some of the things we've said already.
We spoke about this in the beginning. Hazrat Adam in the Holy Quran, when we read that Allah Ta'ala says that I'm about to place a vicegerent in the earth.
Right.
And then the angels, they kind of, counter question Allah Ta'ala, and they say, will you place someone in the earth who's going to shed blood and kill people? This, it's very interesting because that was the state of man before. We didn't know anything else. We would
That was their
hunt.
moral state.
That was a moral state because it was all instinct. It was all reaction to an action. And then Allah Ta'ala says that I'm going to teach him names. I'm going to do this, and now you're ready to receive or have that communion with Allah Ta'ala.
So that was the very basic teachings that was given to Hazrat Adam at
to
that
clothe, to feed, and
Right.
shelter, and all of these things. Before it didn't exist. Society was just groups going from one place to another in search for food and survival. That's basically.
And then as
what it was.
religions were revealed to different nations, the moral teachings became more comprehensive, and it was as they were developing their
And it reached the
abilities
peak at the time of the Holy
and
Prophet
their mental
ﷺ.
faculties, as it were, and then they were able to finally come to the religion of Islam, for example, which claims to be the final law. An interesting issue that we do also come across is atheists say that they do good deeds, but they do it for nothing in return, right? So there's nothing there for them to be punished for or to be rewarded for either, and that is not their motivation. They do it because it's the right thing to do, whereas people of religion say that there is this idea of heaven and hell. How would we respond to them, for example?
I think the first thing that we would say is what Raza Sahib mentioned a while ago. So what? So what if we do something for a reward or for fear? We're still doing the good thing.
Yeah.
But there's an assumption in this question. The assumption is that atheists do things selflessly, and believers do things selfishly. But let's say, for example, an atheist, let's ask a person who doesn't believe in God why they do a certain action. Why do they take care of a sick person? And they would say, well, we do so because it gives us pleasure of heart. Our heart compels us to give charity and take care of the sick.
Yes.
Well, Hazrat Muslim Maud responds by saying, the second Khalifa of the promised Messiah of the community says, well, if it's the heart that compels you to do that action, then you're not really doing it selflessly.
Right.
The heart deserves the credit for that.
It makes you feel good.
It makes you feel good. So you essentially you do that good deed not because of love for that person, but because it gives you a sense of self-satisfaction. That's also selfishness as well.
Right.
But the thing that we need to understand is that when we start from this concept of reward and punishment is the very base level of training in every aspect. When we have 2-3-year-old children, we'll tell them that you don't do this, and if you don't, for example, today I tell my son, I want you to read 5 pages of this book and I'll give you a chocolate by the end of it. And he does it for the reward of that chocolate. He gets the chocolate, and then eventually he'll reach a stage where he'll read for the love of reading, and I won't be giving him a chocolate every time he finishes a book. It's a training process.
Right.
So you give a reward to encourage people who are at a very base level to do good things. And we do this with our children as well.
Yes.
We will reward them for doing good things, and then when they grow older, they don't receive that reward anymore. They're expected to do those basic good deeds which we taught them when they were children. And that's what God does as well. There's a very famous saying of the promised Messiah ﷺ, where he says that I'm here for the service of Islam, and if I were to die and God said to me that I'm going to send you back in the world to convey the message of Islam and the unity of God to the people, but I wouldn't give you any reward, the promised Messiah says, I would happily return to the world and die, and then come back, and then die, and then come back for no reward whatsoever, and I would receive the greatest pleasure because I'm doing it for the sake of my Lord. So that is the height of morality, where Muslims, real, true Muslims who reach the highest level of morality, they do those good things not because of a greed for paradise, but for love of their Creator. And that is a very selfless thing to do.
It also comes back to the same point that we mentioned before. What is your definition of good? Right? We spoke about this. Hitler famously was known to be a vegetarian, because he believed that eating animals is not good. But then at the same time,
it's a subjective idea of morality there,
exactly.
right?
But then he's done many other atrocious things which he deemed to be very good. And
didn't kill animals, but killed
he
people.
didn't kill animals, but he'd kill human beings, and we would think that those things are disgusting. But he, in his mind, he justifies those things to be right. And that's why you need God. You need religion to tell you that this is right and this is wrong.
That's very interesting. There's a tweet also we received from a Zilehuma who often tweets us, and she writes that all major religions put emphasis on love, compassion, patience, tolerance, forgiveness, and do promote inner values. Religious beliefs are necessary to provide moral guidance and enhance our spirituality. I think that's a very good note for us to end today. I think it was a very interesting and very insightful discussion here, and it's something that we can learn a lot from as well, this idea that morality is a gradual process. It's not just something that the teachings of Islam don't expect you to reach the highest levels immediately, and morality is there, and the teachings of morality are there to develop us into better human beings. So I'd like to also thank you for tuning in and engaging in the discussion today. We spoke about the subject of religion and morality, which came the religion and morality, which came first. I hope that we explored the questions adequately and that you found the show to be interesting and beneficial. Please keep sending us your comments and feedback on our Twitter handle, which is @beacon_MTA, or email us on our email address, beacon@mta.tv. Join us again next week at the same time on Beacon of Truth. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you.
इस्लाम कुछ भी हो जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना पड़े हमें जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना